Oh, I want the intrusive thought to win. But I'm in my Zen era. So, I'm not going to let it win. Actually, I will. And I'm gonna stand on what I have to say. I'm gonna say what I have to say, and I'm gonna stand on it. Hello, lovies. Welcome back to another video. My name is Hannah Rowe. Today's video is about how we need to quit romanticizing dysfunction. And I know that statement alone is such an umbrella statement. There are so many topics I could discourse under that statement, so I'm gonna pick one. Today's topic will be about fashion, and I feel like it's so perfect to talk about this with Christmas around the corner, because come Christmas Day, max consumerism personified is birthed on the internet. So many girls are just itching and scratching to do their $100 to $200 Shein haul. Look in the mirror, you're disgusting. As well as my $1,000 to $10,000 Christmas haul. Okay, consumerism to the extreme personified. That's why. Unless, this is where I'll advocate for those girlies, it is genuinely like 5 items that will last them their lifetime. And by 5 items, I just mean like well ethically made, sustainable clothing. Which is what I'm going to discourse. What has inspired me to talk about this topic is through watching Poldark. Please don't spoil anything except Ross Poldark's life, because I don't care. I don't care about him. I care about Dr. Ennis more than anyone. That is my baby. That is the love of my life. Fictionally, I love Dr. Ennis, okay? And he would be an advocate against fast fashion. Anyways, today's discussion is about how a lot of the problems we face in the 21st century, including the problem of fast fashion, all stem back to the Victorian and Edwardian eras, aka the 19th and 20th centuries, or 1800s and 1900s, however you need me to say that. Boom, there's your timeline. They're not new. The Industrial Revolution really birthed consumerism and changed the game for manufacturing. That's undeniable. But through changing the game for manufacturing was consumerism born. Through the 19th and 20th century, the idea of disposability was just pushed through new facets such as magazines, newspapers, as well as catalogs. And this was all planned obsolescence. Like, the factories wanted to not only make society believe that they needed new and cheap made products over old and sustainable or sustainably made products, but also feed into the idea that mass consumerism is what they desired over longevity and quality. You want quantity versus quality. And it's not new that fabric is made cheaper now. Back in the 19th and 20th century, fabric was made to be thinner. Fabrics such as cotton, linen, silk were beginning to be made thinner, so societally, people that bought these manufactured fabrics would be forced to buy more, since the products they did buy were made so cheaply that they fell apart quicker. So clothes before the 19th and 20th centuries were made to last. What we know as upcycling today was common back in the 1700s, 1600s, 1500s. Clothes before the 19th and 20th century were made to last your whole lifetime, or made to last multiple lifetimes. And how they did that is by having 1, thicker fabric, and 2, constantly upcycling clothes. And by that, I mean adding new lace, adjusting hemlines, making one dress into a new dress by beading pearls or jewels, like just continually taking what they had and adding on to it. So if you want to understand in even greater terms, back in the, I'll argue, 13th century through 18th century, individuals' clothes lasted their lifetime, and while that on average would be 40 or 50 years, that number is skewed because of how infant mortality rates and child deaths were so great due to epidemics, plagues, warfare, so forth. Like a lot of the catastrophes that they experienced back then that we still experience today took out the kids. So mortality rates are very skewed in all honesty. But the truth that remains the same is clothes were made to last a lifetime. Hearing an item lasted 40 or 50 years sounds so whack. It's the nicest way I can put it. It can be so conceptually challenging to process, considering how much mass consumerism is advocated for still in today's society. But that's how life was, and that's how honestly life should be. As humans aren't meant to partake in mass consumerism of anything. Fashion, food, alcohol, smoking, shopping, buying material things. One, scientifically, we don't have the capacity to be mass consumerists and live sustainable lifestyles. That is just proven by psychology and science. But if we want to get religious or spiritual with it, a lot of the main religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all advocate against being materialistic, even outside of the main religions. Taoism, if you want to take it even further back, kind of back in the agricultural mindset, so before 4000 BC Sumeria, people weren't thinking about how can I invest in mass consumerism, they were thinking survival. How can I make what I have last me forever or as long as possible? And that's why a lot of the religions and spiritual practices we know today advocate against being materialistic or mass consuming, because consumerism ultimately breeds, being so polite using that term, but all mass consumerism breeds is greed, entitlement, envy, jealousy, and honestly the last one, which is like sloth, if the 7 deadly sins, or laziness in other words, which is so sad. And I hate saying 7 deadly sins, so I'm gonna choose to use Carolyn Miss's term, the 7 shadows. All mass consumerism does is accelerate the 7 shadows in our lives. But back to the 19th and 20th century, the idea of disposability was very much becoming more and more socially accepted as time progressed and as factories began to produce more and more and put out advertisements. And we still see that today. The idea of replace, don't repair is an idea that's lasted 300 plus years now because of how companies are constantly advertising in all the ways their product will make your life better. And now we are just dealing with the extremist circumstance of these issues, the extremist level, because these fashion houses now aren't doing what they did back in the Victorian era and dump their excess locally. They're making this a global issue by dumping their excess waste in other countries. Let me give you an example. So not only are these fashion houses, these fast fashion houses, let me say, or no, I'm gonna say fashion houses, because some brands do and have been caught allegedly for partaking in this, but majority of all fast fashion houses not only hire child laborers to work in sweatshops or exploit immigrant working or exploit just their workers through little pay and inhumane working conditions, but a majority of these fashion houses have agreements, importation agreements with open markets or countries with economic liberalization, which means low tariffs, to dump their excess waste in said countries. So not only are they exploiting those that work for them, whether it be immigrants, women, children, they're taking the waste that doesn't sell and dumping it in these countries in tons, and like the tons, it's not even just 5 products, it's like 5 tons plus of worth of waste being dumped in Ghana, Bangladesh, and China every day. And these countries are trapped, I'd argue, and I'll say allegedly to avoid lawsuits, they are trapped and tricked into having trade agreements that are... I was so riled up on this portion, I was stumbling over my words. So let me break down these trade agreements. Essentially, brands make agreements with the government, and then one government will contact another government and say, hey, we will give you our excess goods if we can have it imported to you for this price for this amount of time. And if the recipient government says, yeah, we'll take the excess goods, aka your waste, for that price for that amount of time, trading will happen for, normally it's a 5-year agreement, but said agreements can be elongated as long as the recipient country continues to sign off on being said recipient. And of course, trade agreements can be renegotiated, tariffs can be added or taken away, but these trade agreements go from just being 5 years to 15 years to 20 years and decades, so forth. And if we don't stop them, it's going to reach the centuries. Greatest example, the American government has a trade agreement that's lasted with Africa, the AGOA, since 2000, and it was a 5-year agreement that then got signed off to be another 10-year agreement, and then in 2015 got signed off to be another 10-year agreement. So these agreements last decades. Thus, these countries, the recipient countries, are receiving excess waste for decades, and it's not monthly. Why they are called short-term agreements is because the brands and the excess waste will be dumped in these recipient countries in short periods of time, meaning a few weeks or 2 to 3 months max. And then the recipient country has just an allotted amount of time before the next shipment comes, say 3 to 6 months later. And it's not just little drop-offs. This is one country dumping tons into another country and saying, you have 3 months to sell 50 tons or 50,000 tons of our excess waste. And that is being generous with the numbers, but that's essentially how these trade agreements work and how one nation is marketed our waste as being profitable to their civilization, when ultimately it is just harming their civilization and their country's general well-being. It's ruining these countries that have these trade agreements. Now Ghana is facing issues within their own civilization because of the tons of waste being dumped there, and this waste is non-biodegradable. A lot of fast fashions making downright plastic clothing for their consumers to buy, and then this waste is going to Ghana in the tons, and women are trying to sell 100 to 200 pounds of clothing a day they carry on their backs and only make $2 on average a day from the load they carry on their backs. And now Ghana's having a pollution crisis because this excess clothing is just laying in their waterways, is laying in the streets, is taking up farmland. It is making it extremely impossible to have a livable country. Like, oh my God. I just get so mad at that. I get so mad thinking about the Ghana Katanamos market. I get so mad thinking about Bangladesh's polluted waterways and the parts of China that are just absolutely becoming landfills, and these people, their way of life is trying to sell waste, and it doesn't benefit them. This is only harming them, and it just moved our problem abroad. It's made our problem other nations' issue. It's made it a global problem now. So the social norms of the 19th and 20th century remain the same today in the 21st. And through the rise of the middle class, arguably, owning new and more is viewed as status, and thus magazines, catalogs, and advertisements continue to encourage people to chase novelty. And arguably, we now have more facets of encouraging said novelty. I want to spit saying that. Through social media. Social media now pushes out with the old and in with the new, just the same way in the Victorian era, a magazine and newspaper was encouraging replace, don't repair. We just changed the wording a little. Anyways, another issue we share is Victorian women were just as an Edwardian women and men. I mean, not just categories women. The same issue of individuals in the Victorian era just throwing out a perfectly wearable silk gown is still prevalent today. On average, the individual in the 21st century wears an outfit 7 to 10 times or a handful of times before discarding it. 7 to 10 times in one's lifetime is a blink. That is a whack statistic. What? And that's not new. That's a trend that has remained in fashion for now 300 years. That needs to change. I am calling for change. I'm trying to highlight that we need to change it, because 7 to 10 times in a lifetime is so short. In Victorian and Edward reality, fabrics such as silk, cotton, and wool were high quality and priced very high, just as they are today, because of how poor quality factories were manufacturing. So we also share that issue. A lot of the high quality fabrics today, which is linen, wool, silk, cotton, tencel, alpaca, and leather, are high priced because if they're made pure and organically, that means they're not sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, and defoliants. Why this has become so is through government forcing brands or brands seeking cheap resources, and said cheap resources involve using toxic chemicals to get quicker results and faster production. So what's made cotton so sought out as high quality fabric today is because a majority of cotton or cotton farmers are in these agreements with companies to use pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, and defoliants to have faster production. And let me read you what these chemicals include, okay? Because it's not gonna make you feel like that top you just bought off of Shein is beneficial to your life. A lot of what you're buying is just slowly poisoning your body. And so let me read the chemicals and then I'll share a story of like real life me experiencing harm from this. Chemicals include aldecarb, which is a potent nerve agent, banned or restricted in many countries but still used elsewhere. Parathion and methimidofos, highly toxic insecticides that disrupt the nervous system. Alpha cypermethrin and chlorpyrifos. If I mispronounce that, I'm so sorry. I'm putting the words up here. Correct me in your own time. Those two chemicals cause drowsiness or dizziness, have been linked to causing genetic defects, have been linked to the cause of cancer, and may damage unborn children. A lot of herbicides found in conventional cotton crops are genetically modified to be resistant to herbicides like glyphosate, an active ingredient in Roundup. So Roundup is not only being used in our food, it's in our clothing. Got it, great. Defoliants. Before mechanical harvesting, chemicals are sprayed to make leaves drop, making it easier to pick up cotton balls, i.e. we're poisoning the plant and then taking the part we poisoned and using it to make clothing and spraying more poison on it. And processing chemicals. In the manufacturing stage, raw cotton is further processed with substances like chlorine, bleach, hydrogen peroxide, and formaldehyde for various properties like wrinkle resistance, softness, and dyeing. I have a formaldehyde story. I, last year, same time this year, worked for a department store that I shall not name so they cannot have the joy of suing me. But I worked for a department store and I was supposed to work beauty and fragrance, but they made every excuse under the sun to why they couldn't train me in that department. and instead forced me to work in the men's clothing department. And a majority of the clothing in the men's clothing department was wrinkle-free, meaning it was doused in formaldehyde. I would, for hours, have pants, jackets, t-shirts, you think of it, stacked on my shoulders. I would have just so much clothing on me as I'm folding it, organizing it, putting it away, making it look nice, that I had a formaldehyde reaction so severe it sent me to the ER. I was found passed out in the men's clothing aisle, and the guy who ran the Ralph Lauren department, which I wasn't supposed to ever touch because it was its own department in this store, so I was every other department but Ralph Lauren, which I want to cry. I wanted to cry so bad. Found me, like, passed out and asphyxiating, and I was covered in a red rash. I'll put pictures here. Sent in an ambulance to the ER, where they indeed concluded, okay, she's having a respiratory reaction to something. And I had to do a breathing treatment, so I had to be given an oxygen machine, and for an hour have oxygen put back in my body and breathe out whatever toxicity I had. And then for 3 weeks, I had to use 2 different inhalers, and to this day, I have to carry one on me. I have to just use if I feel like I'm in the presence of formaldehyde, which is found in vapes, fun fact. I indeed had a formaldehyde reaction, and that was not new to the doctors because this has been happening since the 90s. And this especially happened when a certain brand was exposed for making uniforms doused in formaldehyde that caused many individuals to get sick. So I'm not new to this, but that's forever ingrained in my brain. I will never try on a piece of clothing that says it's wrinkle-free or wrinkle-resistant. I will never pick it up again because formaldehyde genuinely sent me to the ER. And I felt like I nearly died. I didn't die, but for 3 weeks, I had to use 2 inhalers multiple times a day, of course spaced out. And on top of that, watch my collarbone up and neck just shed. Like, all the skin those products touched that turned red and flaky just shedded, and I looked horrible. Oh my god. So I say this to highlight the modern parallel of sustainable brands versus cheap synthetics. And instead of cheap linen, we're now genuinely seeing cheap plastics. Fabrics are no longer biodegradable. That's what's causing civilizations such as Ghana, Bangladesh, and China to go in such crisis, is because a linen dress is no longer 100% linen. If it has polyester or viscose in it, it's non-biodegradable, and in simpler terms, pure plastic. And that's another way a lot of these fast fashion houses appear sustainable, as they're saying in their mission statements. Oh, we use recycled polyester, we use recycled fabrics, and then they don't disclose the fabrics. Yeah, in theory that sounds nice, but unless you used recycled organic fabrics, what they're truly saying is we are using recycled plastics to just continue the production of plastic, which is just further harming society. So in conclusion, cheap mass-produced fabrics were common for everyday wear back in the 19th and 20th centuries, just as they are today. The only difference is we're now producing plastic, absolutely biodegradable synthetic pieces of fabric that are harming our ecosystem and our genuine well-being. One modern brand, though, that stands tried and true, and there are a plethora of others I want to mention, is designer Ralph Lauren. He won the Presidential Medal of Freedom in January 2025 for his brand being so rooted in sustainability. I know the Ralph Lauren linen dress I have is made out of 100% linen, thus it is biodegradable compared to a 100% polyester dress, which makes me feel so much better about what I'm putting on my body because it's not poisoning me. not poisoning me. I do want to give other brands their claps. So shout out Stella McCartney, Mara Hoffman, Vivienne Westwood, Eileen Fisher, Christopher Rayborn, Robert One, Ella Titus Bellatrix, who I also wear so much. Oh my god, I love her. I love Ella, if you're watching this, I love you. Those are just a few brands that make it their mission to be sustainable and also ethical in their production, and furthermore influence other brands to follow their lead. As of recently, Burberry has come out with statements saying that they are seeking to be more ethical and sustainable in their production. Other brands like Gucci have come out saying they're working to become more sustainable and ethical. And great example, Chanel. You can go to Chanel's website and they have their sustainable game plan and their ethical game plan in the universities they work for, all there for you to read about. And they list the universities they're working with and where the universities are located, and their plan just keeps growing. They had a 2020 to 25 plan, that 2025 to 2029, 2029 to 2030, 2030 to 2040, it's just growing, and they keep adding on to it. So I want to give those brands their kudos, their claps. And I also want to highlight how this discussion isn't new. Although Alexander McQueen was not notably known for using sustainable fabrics in his lifetime as a designer, he did a very famous show in 2009, Fall Fashion Week, where he had models walk through a landfill. And that was his commentary on the fashion industry and how mass production and consumerism is just leading this world to becoming one giant landfill. So, the commentary on this is not new. It's been a good 20 years since that happened, or almost 20 years, but a lot of brands, I want to give their claps for advocating for change, and also give them their claps for investing in said change. So while not all major fashion houses are notably sustainable, there are many conscious efforts being made, and I feel like that is so important to highlight, because as long as conscious efforts are happening, then change is happening. And that's something we can't rush change. It just doesn't happen overnight, sadly. We have to have a game plan and then build off the game plan. But I do want to highlight that in the fashion world, in all the top dog fashion houses we know very well today are making conscious efforts. And while some may fall short, they are just having their little wake-up call, okay? Sometimes you have to have a fire lit under you for you to be like, oh my god, okay, let me pivot. And that's all I'll say on that. So to wrap up, the parallel between the past indulgences and today's glorified dysfunction in the 1800s and 1900s, cheap alcohol, gambling, and conscious consumption were kind of the three main problems. And today, those have morphed and evolved into binge drinking, Instagram aesthetics, and fast fashion houses. And so the core idea through these problems is how humans still romanticize self-indulgence. And the only thing that's changed is the way we package it, the way we word it. But we face the same problems our ancestors did 300 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago. Because as soon as the Industrial Revolution was born, were these problems born. And as I highlighted earlier, now the issues aren't just local. Back in the 19th and 20th century, they were very much local. But what's remained the same is exploitation of labor, especially exploitation of immigrants and women and children. But what's really changed is how the waste and said labor has now changed from being local to global. And that's sad that our problem with mass consumerism is now being forced upon other countries and marketed as a way for said country to make money, and also reap benefits of our problems, which it's not. It's just harming these countries and making their living conditions unlivable. There are so many nations that are facing these issues that should be our problem, and our problem only. It shouldn't be other people's problem. So the solution, let me sprinkle more hope, because I know this whole video has sounded like the solution, and the only solution to this problem we face in the fashion world, is individuals choosing to have a conscious living perspective, choosing purity over synthetic, choosing sustainability over quantity, and ultimately choosing quality over quantity. So the way we end this cycle of not only poisoning ourselves, our bodies, and causing harm to others and their well-being is through being aware, becoming an advocate, and furthermore investing back into sustainable living. Keep your focus, as I said, on quality over quantity, and invest in natural, sustainable fabrics. Seek longevity. When you choose longevity, you are choosing to invest in your health, and health is not bought. So pick to invest now in your health, then try and spend the rest of your life buying back what you lost, because you ultimately can't buy back what you lost. Health is only achieved through conscious, healthy lifestyles being chosen. That is how health is obtained. So if we seek to have practices of longevity, it's going to take conscious efforts in investing in sustainability and longevity versus quick fixes and mass consumerism. And as I've said, and I will conclude this video with, history is just going to repeat itself, and this problem is just going to grow and grow and become more and more extreme the more people ignore it. So let's quit ignoring it. Let's choose to actively make change. And know the first step in making change is educating, the second is becoming an advocate, and the third is investing. And the more we continue to do these three things, the more change will happen, and this problem will grow to be just something of the past. That is all I have to say in today's video. I know today's video was very different from my normal advice videos, but I really felt called to talk about this because fashion is so near and dear to my heart, and it is the way we express ourselves. It is the way we kind of advertise ourselves to others and show our creativity. So it is so sad to me that we have just allowed mass consumerism and so many brands get away with unethical practices and mass producing non-sustainable clothing. And furthermore, a lot of what people buy today just is poisoning their bodies and harming their health, and also harming someone's health abroad. If anything, I just really want to highlight these issues and be a further advocate to end them. Like, we could end fast fashion in the next 10 years if we wanted to. We really could, or at least refine it more. And I also want to advocate to those fast fashion houses claiming that they are having more sustainable practices. Hold the fire underneath them. As I said earlier, saying you used recycled fabrics unless you were disclosing that you use recycled 100% natural organic fabrics, you are just contributing to the issue of plastic production and consumerism being built around that. And that issue is just going to continue to become an extreme and evolve if we don't put a pin in it now and try and make change. It is possible. We could hypothetically return to a society that has a natural, organic linen and hemp and cotton and silk at our disposal if we chose to invest our money there instead of trying to find cheap ways to cut corners. And I'm just going down the same tangents. I'm going down the same tangents, and I need to go drink a tryptophan drink because I feel the rage. And this is not all I have to say on Quit Romanticizing Dysfunction. I kind of want to make this a series and delve more next week into how rich eat rich and poor eat poor, and how alcohol has always been made to be cheaper than organic foods. Thus, alcoholism is just so glorified and romanticized in society, and that's so sad, and it has been. Because like I said, all the problems we face today in the 21st century have been around for a very long time. It's not just immigration issues and gun regulation and drug regulation issues and big pharma. And that's me getting very political. It also involves our food and our health and wellness and fashion. So, and tobacco. That's whack. I will so do one on smoking and tobacco and just the sadness of that. I used to be a smoker. So, just know I have partaken in the sin. I am not one to cast a stone and not have fault. Okay? I can acknowledge I have had to learn hard lessons hard ways. And I've also had to follow the herd to learn I don't want to be in the herd. So, don't beat yourself up. Just educate, advocate, and invest. And that's how you make change. I love you guys so, so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're watching this. Happy holidays. If it's not the holiday season when you're watching this, have a wonderful rest of your week, of your year, of the month, whatever. And I look forward to delving more and being an advocate more to quit romanticizing dysfunction. Because, oh my god, it's 10:11 p.m. Sorry. I'm ADHD, if you can't tell. And my brain is exploding. Because that's the only way we heal this world and we make change. So, as I always say, je t'aime, bisous bisous, au revoir, and à 23.